Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Buckle Up, where we get hands-on with new watches. And today we're talking about a watch that we designed with Michiel. Hey. So Michiel, for those of them who don't know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your brand?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Michiel Holthinrichs from Holthinrichs Watches. We're quite young. I started the brand in 2016 after I graduated architecture. It's important to say because all the watches are architecturally inspired. And actually through searching in how to construct a watch and how to make it different also in terms of shape, I got to work with 3D metal printing, and I think most people will know us through that. 3D printing has quite a raw texture, and over time I actually started to appreciate that texture as part of the aesthetics. So every watch that we make now is a combination between manual finishing and also partially rough, like how it comes from the printer. Because then, as a wearer or somebody who looks at the watch, you can actually understand how it's made. Yeah. And I called that Horology brut.
Horology brut.
Yeah. And it's inspired by Le Corbusier's béton brut, so it's using the raw textures intrinsic to the manufacturing process.
One question I have: what made you think of 3D printing? You know, what was the moment you're like, aha, I'm gonna use that?
So I came actually from a background where, as a student, I collected broken watches and learned to repair them. So that's how I learned to construct a watch, basically. Like throughout history, so many different types of construction, and also the evolution of how a watch actually over time becomes more watertight, and that kind of that has effect on the construction. But one thing that's somewhat never changed is that traditional case making comes from like starting in a block of metal, and then you cut material off, for example. That means that you're limited to the shape that you can make, because if you have a mill and you have a block of metal and you work around it, you're very limited because the whole machining arm, basically, you can't go into corners, right? So and then through my studies in architecture, 3D printing was, I think, very early adopted. Because it gives so much opportunity for creating complex shapes, but also little details, purely for beauty sometimes, that I thought, hey, is that actually something which also can be done in a high quality material, like 316L or titanium, whatever. And with that, actually building like small particles on top of each other instead of taking material away, you can create open work structures. You can create like very, very cool curves that are very organically inspired, for example. People always think of 3D printing as a cheap way to produce. But in metal, it's actually super expensive, especially if we want to make a small quality product.
Like you can't just like press repeat and just go print, and then all done, right?
Well, in theory you can, but maybe you have to throw like 50% away, and then you have a raw product, which if you want to fit a movement inside and a case back, and you need to have it watertight, it's simply not possible. So you need to calibrate them. Each individual part needs to be calibrated into a CNC machine to make the glass fitting and the screw thread, etc. So that's already more work than mass production normally. And then, of course, you have the fittings, but it still looks like shit. So you need to finish it. So we actually set up trainings in our atelier. Like every person who comes in as a new employee, we actually start with training case finishing. And like the most simple case can sometimes take up to 20 hours, for example.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly not a mass-produced product. And definitely a project of passion. I think it's
absolutely.
People really need to understand like finishing, not just on movements, but also like case finishing is something that I think not many brands pay attention to. Why don't we jump straight into the project that we have decided to call Concrete Jungle? Our inspiration was not only using concrete, because we thought that you guys play with different materials. And concrete was such a raw material that really fit the aesthetic. So let's say, okay, let's play with concrete. But on top of that, because Hong Kong is a city that never sleeps, okay, can we actually make concrete glow in the dark? So it really never sleeps. So we actually came to Mikhail with this crazy idea, and he was crazy enough to entertain it.
Yeah, I think actually you should say that the idea for the loom was a little later.
Yeah.
And then we thought, oh fuck no. So well, we're up for a challenge. I have to say also that concrete, like like I'm from architecture. I love concrete in what the abilities you have in terms of construction. Damian, you know, is my second. I call him my left hand sometimes.
Husband.
Yeah, almost. He's a product designer, and he used to make concrete speakers.
Yes.
So we both had the idea. So, okay, this is really cool. But how to make a concrete dial? It has to be so thin, right?
Yeah.
It's very fragile. So we received over time a lot of different trials in how the material was casted, but also different kinds of percentages of luminous. Yeah. Because actually, you lose a lot of the luminous material because you simply can't see it because it's somewhere inside of the mixture, right? So you only see the top surface. So that's also a challenge: how to treat the top surface well. It looks nice. Yeah. And then at the same time it's luminous. We tried different kinds of finishing of the surface and testing with laser to etch off the top material. You see that there's a lot of extra glow then actually. This result, after many different casts also, eventually looks very smooth and yeah, really good. I've never seen something like this.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this under the UV light. It almost looks like it's like kind of like this frosted surface. Actually a bit reminiscent of the frosting technique that they used for very classic dials in the past. So yeah, it's in a way actually.
Yeah, it does have the texture, but it's also smooth, right?
Yeah, it's smooth, but also in certain light you can kind of see like the shimmer. Yeah, and we decided then to obviously put indices, and we decided to go with the earliest form of Chinese characters, which we thought suited the raw aesthetic.
Absolutely.
What was it? Was it hard for them to then put these on concrete? Because I can imagine concrete is quite brittle. Was it a technical challenge?
Yeah, not as difficult, I would say, as the luminous material, because with the first dials, really they broke already when you looked at it almost, right? So, but we for the numerals we first tried also with laser etching, but like concrete is a mixture of different sizes of compounds also. So you see that when you hit it with the laser, you have quite a rough surface because at one point it goes deeper than the other point where it hits a stone, for example. The etching becomes really rough, and also the edge of the etching becomes quite rough. I think none of us were really happy with that, and it also destroyed the coherence in the luminous effect. And it took, I think, 3 different types of molds before we were able to have this smooth effect. So one of the treatments, for example, in the end, is to wash the material, the top surface, because once it's taken out of the mold, you see that there's these little crisp lines around the numerals, which actually make it look very cheap. So you need to finish it to actually make it look like it's carved and sitting there for 1,000 years already, right? So that's the effect, because the nice thing about these numerals is that they start relatively thin, and then towards the middle of the line they're thicker. So they're very like this organic shape, and it reminds me really of these rock carvings. Yeah. And then the weather in like over centuries goes over it, and it gets slightly rounded, and that makes it beautiful, and it starts to create a history and a story, right? So that's, I think, what we wanted to achieve, and eventually, well, I think the result is really nice.
Yeah, and to pair, we actually even removed the extra, not the usual chaptering you see on the usual models, so you can actually really focus on just the dial and the indices.
Yeah, I think that was really your choice, also to polish the ring.
Yes.
To emphasize more the concrete dial. I think it's a good choice. It's a very tuned down watch now, very subtle. Yeah. But this is where I personally like it a lot, is that once you then start to look at the details, there's a lot to see.
Yeah, this watch, we've decided to present them in 2 offerings. One with these 3D sculptural lugs, and the other one with and these are actually 3D printed, and the other one in the milled
Yeah. So you actually have two different options, and then you say, okay, what's the effect? What's the fun of the 3D then? Well, there, because we had this CNC milled, we actually had a chance to also push the boundaries of the 3D printing. So these lugs in the 3D printed versions are, I think, the thinnest lugs you will ever see on a watch.
Yeah.
So it's really challenging your sense of logics in that way.
Yeah.
So we can now actually create a choice between also of course the budget.
Yes.
But also where's your interested and what do you like? Are you more this outrageous, maybe innovative guy who wants to show off with 3D printing, or do you don't care and you just want to have the nice dial, right? I think it's very fun that we actually decided to do that.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely in the crazy camp.
Good.
Yeah. Well, there's a watch for all of you, so if you're interested, check out the link in the description below.